Okay, well, let's welcome Jerod Morris here to the summit.
Hey, Mario. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy you're here, Jerod. Thanks a lot. And, I mentioned this before. I'm excited to bring in other people, outside of real estate, podcasters, experts, and you kind of fit that bill.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and to talk with you and your audience. It'll be fun.
And well, it's good. And you're the VP of Marketing at Rainmaker Digital.
Yes, I am.
And you're also the host of multiple podcasts. So do you want to kind of go through the podcasts that you've been affiliated with, the past year or so?
Sure. Yeah. The one obviously where you and I became acquainted was the Showrunner, which is a podcast that I host with Johnny Naster, and it is part of Rainmaker FM, and it's our show about podcasting where we take people through how to develop, launch, and run their own successful shows. Getting ready to launch a new one with Brian Clark that'll be on Rainmaker FM called The Digital Entrepreneur. So not sure when this will be live, but that may or may not be out once people are able to see this, but it'll be coming on Rainmaker FM as well. And then I like hosting shows so much that it's what I do in my free time as well. And so I actually host a couple of shows about Indiana basketball because I grew up in Indiana, and as many people know, it's kind of our religion in Indiana to love basketball. So I host a couple of shows about my alma mater, and then I also host a show called Primality Primer, which began as a daily show. I did about 80 straight days in the morning of a new daily episode. As of you and I speaking right now, I'm on a short hiatus from that, but I'm excited to get back into it. Not quite sure if it'll be daily again or if I'll switch it up, but definitely looking forward to getting back to creating content over there. I think that's most of them.
So go Hoosiers, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, and I think one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you here to the summit is what you're doing with Primality. So I know you're going to talk about that with your 3 tips. So, like I mentioned before, you go through your 3 tips. I might have a question here or there. And at the end, I do have a bonus question. I'll kind of spring on you. But very easy. I ask all the guests. So I'll let you kind of roll with it, Jerod.
And the folks know that I don't have any specific experience in real estate, right? And that's okay?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I think, and I have a lot of people like yourself that don't have, real estate experience, but I think it's important to get different perspectives because us as realtors, we're just kind of caught in the trees. And from you, from the outside, you can help us be better.
Well, and it's funny. I was actually just before we started talking, I was listening to an episode of the new Rainmaker podcast that Brian Clark did, and he was talking about how important it is to kind of get out of your own little area sometimes and hear ideas from other people, because a lot of times taking those ideas and then applying them in a new way to what you're doing into your situation can sometimes give you the best solutions because they're more creative solutions than just what you hear in your own echo chamber. It's it's the same for us with with digital marketing. It's nice to get out of that echo chamber and learn from other people, what they're doing, and then be able to apply it to what we're doing. So I like that. I agree with that philosophy.
Yeah. Plus, you're a consumer too. You bought a house, I'm sure, and
I did about a year ago.
Exactly. So you've dealt with realtors, and maybe you can share some of your horror stories, or maybe some of your good stories. But we'd love to hear those too.
Yeah, well, the actual buying of the house was nice. It's everything that's happened after that has been a horror story. But I don't know if we'll get in too much to that. But it's been a good experience overall, I would say.
Yeah, all you got to say, you're in contractor hell right now.
Yes, I am. That's an apt description.
Okay, well, you go ahead then.
Sure. So, when you asked me to do this, I was really, really excited. And admittedly, I was a little bit nervous about what kind of tips I could provide to a real estate market that, like I said, I'm not, a part of the audience that is listening to this. And I've spent a lot of time creating content for audiences that I've been a part of. And so I really appreciated this opportunity to do this. And, ultimately, when it comes to the 3 tips that I have to provide, really the second and third tips both emanate somewhat from the first tip. And the first tip is really the basis for the show that we talked about earlier that I was doing, this Primality Primer. And Primality, if you're not familiar with that word, yes, it's up here over my right shoulder on my wall. it's a word that I made up. And it happened, it was like back in 2005. I was actually working as a door-to-door coupon salesman in Miami, Florida, which was the most ridiculous job I've ever had, and also in some ways probably the most educational job that I've ever had. And part of what the company that I was working for, they wanted you to do is kind of see yourself as a business owner. And the whole idea was that you would build your own business around selling coupons. And they sold the dream, and for a couple of months I bought in hook, line, and sinker. Anyway, I left shortly thereafter. But, when it was my time to decide what I wanted my company to be called, I really tried to think of what are kind of the core principles that I try to live by. And for me, trying to achieve balance has always been very important. I've always been somebody who can go 100 miles an hour in one direction and really dig into something, but then, other aspects will fall off. And there's kind of been this pendulum. And I've always tried to gain more balance. And so this idea occurred to me of, two opposing forces. And if you can keep them in balance, on a daily basis and really focus on it, how much can that help you? And for me, the ones that really made sense were pride and humility, because I found that in a lot of situations, my situations where things didn't go as I wanted, maybe I didn't succeed how I wanted to, or I didn't treat someone how I wanted to, or I just didn't achieve the goal that I wanted to, something in there would be out of whack. Maybe my pride would morph into conceit or vanity or arrogance, and I wouldn't learn what I needed to learn, or I wouldn't listen when I needed to listen. But other times it would be my humility that was, turning into meekness. And instead of being overconfident, I didn't feel like I had anything to add, so I wouldn't speak up, or I wouldn't even start because I thought, well, I don't have the experience. I can't do this. And I realized that when those two were in balance was really when the best things in my life would happen, when I would make the best decisions, when I would treat people the best and have the best interpersonal relationships, and when I would be able to set goals and then achieve those goals. And so that is my first tip. My number one tip, which is to balance pride and humility, because they're both important and they also both balance each other out. So, for example, pride is very important because you have to have confidence in your own abilities to do whatever it is, to do your job well. If that's as hosting a podcast, if that is selling real estate, you have to have confidence in your ability to do the job well. And at the same time, you also have to understand your personal motivations for why you want to do your job well, because we all have reasons why we want to be doing what we're doing and what we want to achieve. And we need to understand those, because those help drive us to do the hard work and to show up every day, which is necessary for us to achieve what we want to achieve. And we also need to take pride in our past accomplishments, because the knowledge of what we've already done should help spur us on to future achievement as we go forward. But at the same time, it can't just be all about that, because if we're only focused on our confidence and what we're good at, if we're only focused on our own goals, if we're only focused on our past achievements, it's very easy for us to start getting an inflated view of ourselves and to start acting because we want to look a certain way, right? That's vanity. Or to believe that we can just go out, show up, and do well, don't have to listen, don't have to, listen to other people's opinions, don't have to work hard. That's where the arrogance and the conceit comes in. And so that's where balancing it with humility becomes so important, because humility helps us focus on empathizing, really focuses on listening, and reminds us of the hard work that it takes day after day after day to achieve something. Because while it's great to recognize what we've achieved in the past, we also have to have the humility to understand that past achievements are in the past, tomorrow hasn't happened yet, and there's just this great, grand, awesome power of now that we have to recognize and we have to fully buy into, because if we don't do something right now, then we're never going to have past achievements to, to be able to rely on. And that future that we're hoping for will never come. And so, when I look at it from a realtor point of view, how you balance these, I look at pride as being, about having that confidence to based on what you've done in the past, to know that you can connect with a buyer or a seller, to know that you can go into a house, study the house, understand a house's strengths and weaknesses, and be able to describe and accentuate the strengths while minimizing the weaknesses, or even finding, a connection between house and person where the weaknesses aren't even necessarily weaknesses. These are all skills that are learned over time, and it's important to have pride in them. It also takes a certain amount of pride to be able to close. As someone who maybe hasn't sold a house but has done plenty of sales knows, closing is difficult, and it does require a certain boldness when people are giving you those quote unquote buying signs to help them take that next step. And, closing kind of gets a bad rap, like you're forcing someone to do something, but you're really trying to lead someone to a decision that they want to make. And when you can recognize that someone's at that point, there is that moment where boldness is required to do it and to help people overcome those fears. And part of how you do that is with humility, right? Balancing that pride out with humility. So the humility to listen to people, that was one thing. We had a few different realtors that we worked with, and the one that really ended up connecting with us is the one who asked us questions and listened, and when we would show up the next time would ask us a question about something that happened before and knew our names, like all these little things that built that connection. And so you can have pride in your ability to build a connection, but it's the humility that actually allows you to do it, and that's where that sweet spot happens. And then again, just the humility to listen, the humility to show up day after day. And again, if you become too humble, now maybe you don't step up and make the calls to go find new clients. You don't think that you are really good enough to sell this house. When that moment to close comes, you shy away from it because you're meek instead of stepping up with the boldness that you need to have. And so you can see how it kind of teeter-totters back and forth, but every time when you have those elements of pride and humility in that sweet spot in the middle, again, to me, in my experience, I've made better decisions, I've connected better with people, and I've come closer to achieving my goals. And so I think for you, in what you're doing, with real estate, with selling houses, with connecting with potential customers, when you can balance your pride and humility in a lot of those ways that I've described, it'll put you in that sweet spot where you can do the same thing, make better decisions, connect better with people, and achieve your goals in a more consistent and meaningful way.
So I think that's, I like everything that you're talking about. So I have a question. Mm-hmm. I think one of the traps we fall into as realtors is that I'd say 80% of the realtors have too much pride, too much ego. How do you try to counter that? And then I think there's different areas. One area is when we're dealing with the customer. Another area is when we're dealing with other realtors and we're trying to get a deal put together. And if our pride is threatened, our ego is attacked, the natural tendency is to fight back. Do you have any advice to try to prevent us from, taking that carrot and fighting somebody? What can we do to try to minimize our pride, to realize that we have to step back and help our customer, and it's not in our best interest to get into a fight with another realtor?
That's an awesome question. And it's hard. That's a really hard question to answer. I find myself, for the most part, when I feel like I'm going one way or the other, it's too much on the pride side of it. And I think for me, primality has always been a tool for self-awareness. And I think that's where it comes in, is recognizing when those times happen. So you're talking about these moments where you're feeling this pride and all of that, being able to step back and recognize, okay, what is this feeling? Like, what really is bringing this on? And actually, my second and third tips, I think, play into this, because I think when we make it a consistent practice, both empathy and gratitude, I think a lot of what it does is it really helps to dissipate some of those times when pride runs rampant. And I think when we can see that and realize, I'm being arrogant, I'm being conceitful, I'm acting out of vanity right now, that will help us just make that next decision better. So instead of, engaging in that person, escalating it to the next level, say something kind and walk away. Realize that our time is better spent connecting with another customer than getting into an ego match with another realtor, and so understanding the goals is very important. And again, just realizing, in this moment right now, what is driving me? Am I not speaking up because I'm being overly humble, or am I ready to fight this person because I'm being overly prideful? What next decision can I make to bring some balance into that? And that's always helped me, because sometimes we get so bogged down that it's going to be really hard to change course with something. And sometimes it is, but the only way to really do it is to make that next decision a better one. And when we can simplify it down to, let me just make this next decision better, regardless of which side it's on, I think that is the best way, the simplest way to make it an effective one, to move forward in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think when you say self-awareness, I think that's perfect, to be aware of where you are in that situation. And one thing that I've said, Jerod, over the years, because I get baited all the time, when I'm working, and I have to kind of control myself. And I say, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. What matters is serving the customer.
Absolutely. And that's what it comes down to is, we talk about this all the time at Rainmaker, at Copyblogger, it is about serving. And that's one of kind of the phrases I've used with Primality, is serving boldly, right? Because, to serve, you do have to believe also that you have something to give, that you have something worthwhile, because serving is leading as far as I'm concerned. I think people think of leading as being out front, but serving is being there in the trenches with people. And maybe you have something to add because you have more experience, you have a unique perspective, you have something. But I agree wholeheartedly with that. When we take an attitude, a mentality of serving, it makes it helps us make every decision be better, because it reminds us of where our place needs to be.
Okay, cool. Go ahead with your next one then.
With tip number 2, so I kind of alluded to this, but tip number 2 is practicing empathy. And when I use the word practice, I'm being very intentional, because I think too often I hear people say have empathy. And when you have something, that suggests that at some point maybe you didn't have it, or that you were born with it or given it or something, but that you could have or not have it. And I think what's important with empathy, and empathy, of course, is being able to really understand the perspectives, the feelings of someone else, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's not about having it or doing it once. It's about practicing it and making it a daily, a regular occurrence. And I think, in any sales context, empathy's almost become this overused buzzword. And so I hesitate to use it sometimes, but it's also perfectly descriptive of the idea that we're trying to get across. To sell anything, it requires putting yourself in the other person's shoes to understand the benefits from their mindset. And that can make empathy almost seem like this kind of self-serving strategy that you can use. And I suppose in some ways it is, but true empathy actually means, you don't care about this person just because they're going to buy something from you. You care because you want to help them, and you just happen to have skills or inventory that can help them. And when you can merge that together and be genuine about it, now you have real empathy. Now you can have a real connection. So whether it's Mario, you selling a house to someone, whether it's me with the Showrunner podcasting course, selling that course, it's not like I want to get as much money from as many people as possible, whether they like podcasting or not. No, it's really stepping into people's shoes, understanding what they need from a podcasting course, right, to be able to develop the right one, understand what people need from a house to be able to find the right matches for them, and then be able to communicate with them on their level. And so actually I put together kind of this little framework for how to practice empathy in individual situations. And this is something that I use, and maybe it can help you too. The first step is to listen. And listening isn't just with our ears, but we also listen with our eyes and with our senses, because there are verbal and nonverbal cues that people give off that suggest to us, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what's important to them. And so listening is by far the most important part of empathy. But then it's about stepping back. So it's not listening and reacting right away, because our initial reactions to what we hear from somebody, they may not be accurate. But it's stepping back, getting outside of ourself, and not listening only in the context of how it affects us, but actually listening in the context of how it affects that person. Because if we just, like we were talking about earlier with those moments of pride, where you're ready to go at somebody. A lot of times that happens because we're listening only for how what is being said or communicated affects us. And I think really effective listening requires taking a step back to listen and process and consider what is really being communicated and seeking to understand. So what is and maybe what is not being said, what is being felt, because sometimes people aren't great at communicating with words how they feel, or they're holding back. But it's our job as much as possible as listeners, as empathizers, to try and understand what's being felt. What are the feelings behind the words? And then to act with kindness, because the golden rule never fails. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. However, there's many different variations of it, but the idea is the same. Do to other people as you would hope to have them do to you. And that, to me, is always just an easy criteria for what I should and shouldn't do. If I would be okay with you doing it to me, then I'm okay to do it. And if I wouldn't want it done to me, I'm not going to do it. And that's kind of the last line of defense, I think. If maybe you haven't listened well enough, or you don't really understand what the other person needs, as long as you just don't do something to them that you wouldn't want done to you, that's going to help. But I really think doing that, listening, really stepping back, seeking to understand, and then acting with kindness, when we can do that, our empathy comes out. And then practicing that, really focusing on it, makes it a regular habit that then we just do without thinking. And then we're practicing empathy. You can say at that point you have empathy, but the words that we use really help frame our thoughts and actions. And that's why I think thinking about it in terms of practice reminds us that it's great that we did it yesterday, but we've still got to do it today. And doing it today will help create the habit that will help us do it tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Practicing, when I hear that, it makes me more aware to be empathetic, not just take the assumption, okay, I care about them, but, listening is key. And I think that, all the realtor training, everything that I've heard, in any sales training, you got to listen and exactly what you're saying, verbal and nonverbal. So I think that is good. And
you have to care too. I think sometimes people mistake not talking with listening. And that's not true. Like at that point, you're hearing, but you're not really listening. Listening is really caring. And again, trying to understand the feeling behind the words. And it's important in our professional lives and our personal lives and everything that we do. That's something that can help out everywhere.
Yeah, what's the biggest complaint we hear from our wife? You're not listening to me.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So, no, that's good. That's really good. I like the practice part of it. And then, one quick point here, Jerod has a really good PDF that he's created for all of you. It'll be a download on the speaker page, so you can reference that. He's going through all that. So, go ahead.
So, tip number 3, are we ready? So tip number 3, we're going back to the practice word again. And I have to give credit. I don't anymore. I need to get back to it. But I used to be a regular practitioner of yoga. I got really into yoga for a couple of years. And that's where I really got this idea of practicing. Because with yoga, you don't do yoga. You practice yoga. And it was such an excellent lesson in humility, because there's always something new to get better at. And you're just practicing. No one's perfect. No one has everything figured out. Everyone is practicing. And so I think with empathy, that's true, because we get opportunities every single day to be empathetic, and we're never going to be perfect at it, but we can always try and get better. And I think the same is true with gratitude. And so tip number 3 is practicing gratitude. And, when I was looking up, I wanted to get the exact dictionary definitions for these 2 words. And I thought the definition of gratitude was really interesting to me. Gratitude is the quality of being thankful, which we all know that. But then I like this second part, the readiness to show appreciation for and to return kindness. And that is so important about gratitude, is that it's not just about thinking it or feeling it, or saying, thinking to ourselves, boy, I'm really thankful that person did this. I'm grateful that I have this. It's about doing something to show people that you have it, whether that is just saying thank you or writing a thank you card or doing an act of reciprocation that helps that person out after they've helped you, or even just recognizing that maybe because of the circumstances of your birth or your life or luck, whatever, that you've had some great blessing bestowed upon you, not just taking that for granted, and whether it's paying it forward or doing something to try and pass that on or help someone else out. It all, not only does it help make us happier, and there are plenty of, I'm sure everybody who's watched this has probably seen all the studies that have come out recently about how gratitude makes us happier, and it's one of the keys to happiness, but it also makes other people happier. It makes other people feel appreciated. And when others do kind things for us and we thank them, they are more likely to do kind things for others. Just as when we do something nice for someone and they thank us and it makes us feel good for doing it, now we're more likely to do it. And that's why, to me, gratitude is this great way to not only make our own lives better, our own daily lives, have a better attitude, feel happier, feel better, but it's just such a great way to put that positive energy out in the world and help make others' lives better, because the fact that I thanked you will make you more likely to now do something else and to thank other people. Now we've just got this big circle of gratitude going around, and it helps. And I know it sounds cheesy and it sounds frou-frou and all of those things, but the science has proven it. I've felt it with myself. Every time I talk about this with other people, they nod and acknowledge it, because we all know how much of a benefit it can have. And so, the thing with gratitude, and the reason why I think it really falls under the umbrella of primality to me, is because it really requires pride and humility to do well. And the place where I think the humility part is easy, right? Really understanding what other people have done for us and thanking them and reciprocating. But gratitude also requires pride, because it requires recognizing what we've achieved. It requires recognizing what we've been given, what we have, and taking a certain sense of pride in it to realize it's important. And then the humility comes in with understanding all of the other people that contributed to it, whether it was a gift, whether it was someone else's efforts that helped us achieve this big goal, or whether it was simply, like I said before, the circumstances of our life that gave us some blessing. It requires both of them. And so so what does it mean then to practice gratitude, right? It's easy to say, to write a thank you card after someone gives you a gift, and that's certainly a great way to practice gratitude. But I think there's kind of a 4-step process I use similar to empathy, which is, number one, what achievement or gift or blessing has been bestowed upon me, right? Like what do I have to be grateful for? Taking that inventory, and I think doing it regularly. I was using for a while, I don't anymore, but I was using for a while the 5-minute journal, which, some of your folks may have heard of, where it right at the top, it asks you, what are you grateful for today? And it's such a great way to begin your day, thinking about what you're grateful for. And that next step then is, who or what is responsible for this occurring? So we think of the great things in our life, and then let's think about who's responsible. And maybe it's just circumstance or fate. Maybe it's our significant other. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's some random person that had no idea that they were doing something positive for us. And then how can we communicate that gratitude, right? Would it be best to just say thank you? Should we write a thank you note? Should we give that person a gift? Or is there something specific we can do? Can we do something to reciprocate it? Because that's really the ultimate, is not just saying thank you, but saying thank you and then doing something for that other person. And again, gratitude's the same way. We can say, I'm grateful, but then my next question is going to be, okay, what are you doing to show that you're grateful? Like, do you regularly thank people? Do you regularly go out of your way to reciprocate? That's practicing gratitude the same way that we practice empathy. And again, I think thinking of both of those ideas with the idea of practice helps remind us that it needs to be constant, it needs to be every day, and just a part of who we are and what we do. And when we do, there are many, many benefits to other people, obviously, but there are also many, many benefits to ourselves too. And that kind of balance it's all wrapped up in primality. That balance of pride and humility, it helps us, it helps others, and I think it makes it better for everybody, which is the goal.
Well, and gratitude is a huge part of what we do as realtors. I mean, because you already said it. You said last year you bought a house, you met 2 or 3, 4 different realtors, and you chose one realtor. Mm-hmm. So when customers work with us, they are choosing us. So whenever I'm helping my customers, especially if we get to the closing table, I'll say, thank you, Jerod, for choosing me to be your realtor.
Mm-hmm.
And I always have that mindset because just like you said, you got to show appreciation. And us as realtors, if we're not grateful for our customers, we're going to have problems.
And you hit on the humility that's so important there. The humility to understand that you can do everything right and go out and be the best realtor in your own mind. But if other people don't choose you, you never have a client. You never have a customer. And that's so important. And that's part of what my first tip is meant to illustrate, is that balance of pride and humility that you need to be good, not just as a realtor, but in anything.
Yeah, because there's so much outside of our control.
Yeah. Oh, there is. There absolutely is.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, we're in sync here, so I don't have anything to argue with you about.
Nothing at all?
No, nothing at all. I mean, I'm very happy that you're here. I'm impressed. You're a millennial and you're wearing a tie.
Yes. Well, I recently got married, and my wife now has been making fun of me that I've started dressing up nicer. She's like, "Why are you dressing up nicer all of a sudden?" I was like, "I don't know. I'm married now. I feel like I need to class it up a little bit." So,
well, congratulations. I remember your engagement story from earlier this year. So
yes,
you guys are married. That's great.
Yes, I am too. I'm very lucky. Very, very lucky. She's wonderful. So.
Well, that's great. Well, so here's a bonus question.
Yes.
So we're doing the summit. Here it is, the middle of January. So maybe this fits in with primality, but I'm a big believer that we need to look back. So what are you proud of in 2015? Maybe share an accomplishment, a goal. It could be personal, it could be business, something that you're excited about, something that you're proud of, because I think it's important to be proud of what we did when we go forward.
Boy, that's a great question. There are two things coming through my mind when you say that. One's personal and one's more on the professional side. The personal one is getting married. Because Heather and I had really, we got engaged last August, got married this November, and it was taking a little while and we were unsure exactly what we wanted to do. And we finally decided we're going to do it at the house. We're just going to do it. And this was in the midst of having all kinds of issues with contractors. We were having work done because we had a pipe burst, and there were all these different issues. And we just said, we're going to do this. We don't know if it's going to work, but we're going to do as much as we can to make it happen. And we literally had contractors there the day before finishing it up when all of our family was going to arrive. But I'm glad we did it because we were afraid to do it, and it was hard, and it required some extra work, and I had to interrupt a few projects I was working on, which I'll talk about in a minute. But, there's something about kind of setting a goal that almost seems unachievable, working on it with somebody else, sacrificing together, working hard together, and then coming out of it on the other end. And we were, the whole time we were saying, on Friday, because we got married the day before Thanksgiving, and then we were hosting Thanksgiving at our house on Thursday. So a lot of pressure and a lot going on at the house where you need your floors installed, and they weren't even installed yet. We said, on Friday, we're going to sit back once everybody's gone and just be really happy that we did everything. And we really were. And it was just another reminder of the lesson that sometimes you want to set goals that are maybe just a tad outside what you think you can achieve, because it pushes you to a new limit. And not only can you usually achieve it, if you're really committed to it, you learn a little something about yourself in the process. And so I was really proud of that. And then, ironically, that interrupted the other project that I'm really proud of, which is the Primality Primer episodes that I did, because I kind of decided to do that on a whim one day and didn't tell anybody until I had about 5 episodes done, just in case it fizzled out before it ever started. But I think I made it to 80 straight weekdays. I got up, set a schedule at 6:30 every morning that I would produce a new episode and broadcast it live, and then also published it as a podcast. And certainly not all the episodes were perfect. And, there are many that, I probably would have loved to have a little bit more time to prepare for them. But when it's every day and it's that early in the morning, sometimes you just got to turn the camera on and kind of be raw with the audience. And I was really glad I did that. Again, I had to stop it. I look forward to doing it again. But, there's something about setting that daily schedule, and again, doing something a little bit outside of what you think maybe you're capable of, that just pushes you to a new level and teaches you some new lessons about yourself and about whatever the project is, that can be really, really helpful moving forward. So those two, I think, would be immediately the things that come to mind. And really the other one is the Showrunner course, which is just further back in 2015, so it didn't come to mind immediately. But getting to work with Johnny Nastor, who he and I had never met or really talked before we started doing the podcast, and about a month and a half later we were launching a course, was an excellent lesson in really pride and humility. And obviously the community that we have, I'm really happy that I got to meet people like you, is wonderful. And so I look forward to continuing to grow that in the future too.
Yeah, and Johnny, he's in the summit too, so that's awesome. So
Is he?
Yeah, so you're both here.
Excellent. Let me guess, is one of his tips be human?
Yeah, he's a defender of humanity, right?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
No, he had good tips, and he was really good. So yeah, I'm very happy, for what you've been able to do, and I look forward to you getting back in Primality and doing more episodes. And so on your speaker page, I'll put the link to Primality. Is there anything else you want to point people to where they can find you online?
I think Primality would be a great one. The only other one that I would say is for anybody out there like Mario, who's thinking about starting a podcast or using content in that way to connect with your audience, the Showrunner podcast may really help you out. We do have the course, but we also have a free weekly podcast. And so go to showrunner.fm for that. Like I said, we teach people how to develop, launch, and run successful shows. And a show doesn't necessarily have to be a podcast. It can be a content project that you're doing. It can be some kind of video series that you're doing, whatever it is. But that show might have some tips and some insight that can really help you too. Yeah,
for any of you out there thinking about podcasting, I think it's the wave of the future. That's where a lot of you have connected with me through the Honest Real Estate Agent. But I think more realtors could look at doing a podcast for their target audience. And I'll definitely put the link to the Showrunner podcast, what Jerod and Johnny do. I listen to that. And then they have their podcasting course, the Showrunner course. I could put a link to that too. And so Jerod, Johnny, Sonia Thompson, and Samuel Hatton, all four of you are part of the summit, and they're all in the podcasting course.
Very cool. Very cool. That's awesome to see. When you see people coming together over projects that you've been involved in, that's really great.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jerod. I'm really happy you were here. Thanks a lot for taking time out to be a part of the summit.
No, thank you. This was a blast. I really appreciate it.